This is probably the biggest business secret that there is. These are the keys to making sure that your business is profitable. And if you're not making a profit in your business and you're not producing cash, then have you really got a business?
You have to have the investor mindset.
Welcome to the 7-day weekend. And what I want to do is take you through what I call the 5 key drivers for profitability within your business and how you need to think about dividing up the things that are important to creating profit within your business into its component parts to multiply your results. So let's get started straight away. We're all looking for the same kind of results, okay? Most of us, when I speak to business owners, when I say, what could you do with more of? They'll say, we want more customers. But if we drill into that a little bit deeper, why do we want more customers? Well, we want more customers because we want to make more sales, right? And actually, if we drill into that a little bit deeper as well, we don't really want more sales just for the sake of it. Actually, what we want at the end of the day is more profit. So I think you'll agree with me, universally, business owners want more customers, more sales, and more profit, right? Here's the thing though. As you can see, there's an equal sign in front of all of those 3 things, which means they're an outcome of something else. So let's think about breaking these things down into their component parts and working out what are the other things that we're going to need to focus on if we're going to get more customers, more sales, and more profits. So let's start with customers. If we're going to get more customers, clearly we're going to need some more leads. Now think about that for your own business. I don't know your business and I don't know what a lead is for you, but let's say, for example, I was talking to a lovely lady who's just bought a new cafe in Darlington yesterday. And when we started talking about what a lead is for her, really what we're talking about is passing trade. So in other words, anybody that walks past her cafe is potentially a lead for her. And what she's got then is an opportunity with the lovely smell of the baking, with the smell of the coffee, with the look of the shop, with the ambience within that shop also to attract those leads into the shop, and then they become customers. And then for other people, it may well be that they're selling something where they actually have to go and do a home visit. So the number of inquiries that person will get would be the leads, and then the home visit is the opportunity to convert those leads into a customer. So I hope that makes it clear, and you think about for yourself, what is a lead for you? So whatever your definition is, we know that you're going to need some leads in order to get some customers. But when you get those leads, you've now got to convert those, and then you've got a customer. Now conversion is usually described as a percentage or a conversion rate. So for example, for every 10 leads you get, if you convert 3 of those leads into a customer, then your conversion rate is 30%. So it's all pretty straightforward as it stands at this moment in time, but we've got customers now, we've got some leads and we've converted them. Those customers got to transact with us, okay? So they've actually got to do some transactions. And you will find in every business that there is an average number of transactions. Now, depending on the business, some businesses have more transactions with their existing clients than others do. But generally, you'll find that there is probably a way with most businesses to get people coming back more often and potentially referring friends and family as well. So you could maybe lump that together in terms of the number of transactions. Some businesses it's more difficult. So let's say, for example, if you are building an extension, maybe the customer that you're working with on that extension may only need 1 extension in quite some time. Whereas obviously if you take the example of the cafe that I was talking about earlier on, how many times could somebody use that cafe? Potentially they could come to that cafe every single day. So clearly there's going to be more transactions. Now these transactions, that's a number, but what actually we need these people to do is also to spend some money with us. And again, let's just work on averages. So there's going to be an average order value within your business as well. Sometimes people say to me, you know what, there's no average in my business. There's some people could spend £10 and some people could spend £10,000. Well, think about it. There's an average in every business. All you need to do is work out the total value of your sales divided by the number of transactions in a period, and it'll give you your average order value. So I would suggest that you work that number out as well. So now we're looking at this formula so far. We've got as far as sales. Now, if we're going to look at profits, then we're going to be talking about profit margin. Now, in your business, you're going to have two different profit margins generally. You're going to have your gross profit margin and you're going to have your net profit margin. But for the purposes of this demonstration, really what I'm going to be talking about is your net profit margin. So what is left over after you've taken off all of your costs? Whatever is left over, represented as a percentage of sales, is your profit margin. Again, that's represented as a percentage. So what I want to do is demonstrate to you how if you concentrate on these 5 key drivers for profits, you can make a massive multiple on the end result, which is your net profit. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an example of a couple of clients that I work with and talk you through how we've managed to increase their profits exponentially by focusing on these 5 areas. The client in mind is a roofing company. Here's the thing. When I first met this roofing company, they weren't measuring any of these numbers. Now, you may or not have heard of a theory called the Hawthorne effect.
At Western Electric's Hawthorne Works in Chicago in the 1920s, telephone equipment was being manufactured by 40,000 people. What Hawthorne employees had received their company-paid pension plan back in 1906. They had vacations 1 week after 5 years, and they had sickness disability pay. Hawthorne was considered a progressive place to work.
Back in the 1920s, there was an economist called McGregor, and he did some productivity testing on the Hawthorne plant in the United States. And at the Hawthorne plant, there were 2 factories, Factory X and Factory Y. Factory X he used as the control factory, and Factory Y, he actually did some productivity testing on it. And everybody in that factory knew that he was doing productivity testing. The first thing that he did was he increased the brightness of the lights within that factory. Now, what do you think happened to productivity? I can hear you. You're probably saying that the productivity went up. And you're absolutely right, it did. Next thing he did, a couple of weeks later, was he went back into exactly the same factory and he dimmed the lights in the factory. So what do you think happened to productivity now? Now, I'm guessing you're probably thinking that productivity went down. Actually, what happened was productivity went up again. You see, the Hawthorne effect is a theory that whatever you start to measure will start to increase because you're focusing on it. So here's the thing. Even if you do nothing in terms of new strategies and you start measuring these 5 numbers, I'm going to pretty much guarantee that these numbers are going to start to improve just by virtue of the fact that you're giving focus to them. As I talk you through this next example, you'll see how that works. So this roofing company that I was telling you about, as I went to see them, they weren't doing any of this measurement. So it's pretty difficult for them to be able to tell me what was working when it came to lead generation or marketing. Now, you may have heard this said before, where people have said, you know what, I know 50% of my advertising is working, I just don't know which 50%. Well, that means that that company is not measuring their marketing. They're not measuring their lead generation. The sorts of things that you're going to need to measure with your lead generation is the number of leads to start off with, but also where those leads are coming from. One of the things that I quite often hear when I meet new business owners for the first time and I ask them, where are your leads coming from? What do you think is the number 1 response that I get? Word of mouth. Now, that's probably a good thing because it means that that company is doing something well and it means that people are recommending them. But unless there's a strategy behind word of mouth, what that actually means is it's more of a sit and wait strategy. In other words, let's hope that the telephone rings. Let's hope it's somebody that wants to work with us because someone else has recommended us. Okay, now we can turn word of mouth into a really good strategy if we put some referral strategies in place and make sure that we are at least asking everybody that we work with for a referral. Going back to these guys, they weren't measuring any of this stuff, and so when I went to speak to them about what was working with their advertising, they pretty much had the same response. We know that we're getting some leads, but we don't really know where they're coming from. So I got them to start doing some measurements. And what we discovered was that they were getting quite a lot of leads from radio advertising. And we worked out that they actually had made £300,000 worth of sales as a direct result of radio advertising. Now, initially, they thought that was quite good because they worked out that they'd actually invested £200,000 in radio advertising. So the business owner, John, came to me and said, hey, good news. We invested £200,000 in radio advertising and we got £300 worth of sales from it. And I said, yeah, but John, how much did it actually cost you to make those roofs? And he said to me, well, it actually cost us £150,000 to make those roofs, to sell them, to make £300,000 in sales. In other words, they had £200,000 going out to the radio and £150,000 to make the roofs. That's £350,000 and they only made £300,000 in sales. In other words, they were losing money hand over fist. Now, we looked at some of their other marketing and they were getting quite a lot of leads from little directory magazines that would go through your letterbox. In my neck of the woods, they're called On Your Doorstep magazine, and over in York, they're called York Local Link. So we had these magazines that were working really quite well for this roofing company. And I don't know why, maybe that it was because it was local advertising and people that saw these adverts thought, well, this is a local company, they're bound to do a good job for us because they might bump into us in the co-op or the local pub or at the petrol station. Anyway, they were getting a good number of leads from this, and actually it was quite cheap as well. So the good news is we now had £200,000 from a marketing campaign that wasn't profitable that we could now put into a marketing campaign that was profitable. So with that £200,000, and in fact, we didn't spend all of it, but with that £200,000, we put adverts in every little online directory, every offline directory. So the online directories you probably know, you might have heard of, things like Rated People, My Builder, Checker Trade, Trusted Trader. We put all of those out there online, and we had the offline directories as well. So every single little magazine that comes through your door, we put the adverts in there, parish magazines, all sorts of things. And if you excuse the pun, but leads went through the roof. So here's the question to you. What are you doing in terms of the number of strategies that you're using at this moment in time to generate leads within your business? Did you know, for example, that there are more than 100 different lead generation strategies that you could be using? How many are you using at the moment? How effectively are you using them? Now, you won't be able to answer that second question unless you are testing and measuring the lead generation that you're doing. Now, the importance of testing and measuring lead generation is knowing how many leads you're getting, from which sources, how much you're investing to get those leads in the first place, and ultimately, how much it is costing you to buy a customer. Now, if you know all of those things, then you will know whether you're getting a return on investment with your marketing. So if you're not doing that, I would seriously recommend you start doing that right now. But think about it. If you're only using one or two strategies at the moment, and maybe you're not being that strategic about it either, if we were able to help you improve those strategies to start off with, and maybe implement just 2 or 3 more strategies, do you think that we could get just a 10% increase in the number of leads that are coming into your business? I guess you're answering yes, because 10% isn't a lot to ask. So let's put that number on here. So an extra 10% in leads, let's say over the next 3 to 6 months, just by implementing a couple of new strategies and improving the current strategies that you're working on. So let's talk about conversion. Guess what? They weren't measuring their conversion rates. And what do I mean by that? So a lead to this company was when somebody phoned up or emailed and said, hey, I need a new roof. Then they would actually, their sales process was that they would actually make an appointment and go out and see that person, have a survey of the roof and give them a price. So those sales appointments needed to convert so for these leads to be classified as a customer. Now, when I first met them, they weren't measuring any of this stuff. Excuse me. And that's quite common. And I asked them to estimate what their conversion rate was, and they said that they thought their conversion rate was 80%. In other words, of every 10 people they went to see, they believed that 8 people became customers. Interesting. What we actually found out when we started to measure it, that their conversion rate was only 25%. That's the first lesson here. Usually, when we're talking about conversion rate, usually business owners and salespeople, if they're not measuring it, overestimate what their conversion rate is. So my tip is start measuring it and get real and find out what your actual conversion rate is. So with these guys, it was 25%, and it broke down like this. John, the business owner, converted 30% of his sales appointments, and Chris, the sales manager, he converted 20%. Those two things together gave them an average of 25%. So we realized that obviously John was doing something slightly different to Chris because he was getting different results. So we thought, well, how do we find out what that is? And what we did was we got them both to buy one of these digital voice recording devices. And we gave them a script so that every appointment they went to, when they went to see a prospect, they'd sit down with the prospect and say, Mrs. Prospect, would it be okay, so that I get everything that's important to you today and understand what it is that your expectations are going to be when we work with you, would it be okay if I record our conversation so I don't miss anything? Everybody that they went to see with that little script agreed to having that sales presentation recorded. Now, over a 7-week period, we then collated all that information. We used the digital voice recordings to create some transcripts. I think it cost us about £80 from Fiverr.com to create some transcripts of these sales presentations, and we put those together and we looked at them and we modeled best practice. What was working really well, what could be working better, what wasn't working well at all, and what else could we be doing that would maybe make the presentation work a little bit better. And the net result of that was we created some best practice sales scripts for these guys to drill and learn and use out in the field. Really, really simple strategy. But actually, when you think about it, probably there are a number of questions that we should be asking when we're in a sales presentation. And if you've never had any sales training, how would you know what to do? So this was a great way of capturing what was best practice. Now, the interesting thing was we started off at 25%. We knew that John was 30%. So we thought we would probably get the average from 25 to 30. Interestingly enough, it went way above 30%. But we were aiming for 30%. So an increase of 25 to 30 is a 20% increase. Now, we've got about 84 different strategies that you could be using. Now, I'm not suggesting you would use them all, but 3 or 4 new strategies for increasing your conversion rate. If you think about it, if you were able to use 3 or 4 new strategies you've never used before to improve your conversion rate, do you think you could get a 10% increase in your conversion rate too? I'm guessing that you're saying, yeah, it's going to be pretty easy because we're not asking for a lot. 10% is not a lot. So if we can get a 10% increase in conversion rate, we're now starting to massively improve the numbers underneath this. But let's drill into that a little bit further. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about how these guys increase their average order value and their profit margin in one go. The ideal recommended retail price, or what they should have been selling their roofs at, was £4,000. And it cost them £2,000 to make those roofs. So all of that was cost. But what we found they were doing, because they hadn't had any sales training and they weren't working from these scripts, what they were doing systematically in order to make a sale was they were discounting their price. They believed that that was the only way that they could make sales when we first met them. So I said, okay, so how much discount are you giving to people? And they said they were giving 25% discount. In other words, they sit with a customer in their lounge and they say, you know what, Mr. Customer, if you want to buy today, we'll give you a 25% discount. That's how they were making their sales. So a 25% discount of £4,000 is £3,000. So systematically, they were only selling those roofs for £3,000. Now, what does it still cost to build those roofs, even though you're selling it at 3,000 instead of 4? £2,000, right? So look what they were doing to their profit. They were literally halving their profit. So I figured that if we could get them to have the confidence and the ability to sell the roofs at the right price, what would that represent as a price increase? In other words, from 3,000 to 4,000. From 3,000 to 4,000, that is a 33% price increase, or it's a 33% average order value increase. But here's the thing. What does that now do to the profits as an increase? So if the profits selling at 3,000 was £1,000, and now you're selling at 4,000, it's £2,000. That's a 100% increase in your profit margin. 33% increase in average order value, 100% increase in profit margin. That's massive. And the important thing as well is that, don't forget, these things multiply by each other. So the net result on the bottom line is huge. Now, here's the question. Across average order values and margins, there are about 130 different strategies that you may not even thought of yet that you could implement to improve average order values and profit margins. Now, I'm not suggesting you would use all 130, that would be crazy. And they're not appropriate for every single business. But I'm certain that we could find 3 or 4 different strategies in average order value and in margin to improve those numbers by 10%, okay? Now, I keep talking about 10% because what I want to do is get you thinking about this conservatively. 10% increase in these numbers is so achievable. Remember, we achieved 100% increase in margin and 33% in average order value just with one strategy. So I don't think I'm asking a lot for you to put strategies in place which would improve these numbers by 10%. Okay, so far we've gone through 4 ways. Now, number of transactions. As you might imagine, when you put a roof on your house, you would expect that to be there for quite some time. So it's fairly difficult to get more transactions out of the same client for a roof. However, you could include, in terms of numbers of transactions, the opportunity to get referrals. So what we did with this roofing company is we positioned it like this. In order to get these guys to have the confidence to be able to sell the roofs at full price, we needed to do some work, okay? And the best way to avoid price competition is to have a really strong, unique selling proposition and or a guarantee. Now, with roofing companies, I'm going to be honest with you, it's not that easy to find a unique selling proposition. You know, what could you come up with? Sky blue roofing tiles? I don't know, but it's not that easy to come up with a unique selling proposition. So what we had to do is we had to survey the people that really mattered, the important people, who were the customers, the prospects, in other words, people that they'd actually been to see that had decided not to buy from them, and their target market. And we needed to understand what was important to them and what were their expectations when working with a roofing company to really understand how to craft a great unique selling proposition or at least some guarantees. So what we did was we went and surveyed these people. Now, 25% of the people that they went to see bought from them. So we asked them, what was it you liked about this company? Unfortunately, most of them said they had a cheaper price. Not a great start. We then went to speak to the 75% that hadn't bought from them and asked them what sort of things concerned them about working with tradespeople, in particular roofers. What were their worries? What were their concerns? And in particular, why did they not buy from this particular roofing company? We then surveyed the target market geographical area where these guys wanted to sell more roofs and find out what sort of things might worry or concern those potential customers when working with a roofing company. And we discovered 3 main things. Thing number 1, they were worried that they would be waiting in all day for the roofers to turn up. They felt that tradespeople in general were unreliable, and in particular, roofers had a bad reputation, and they thought that these guys would be unreliable, and they'd be wasting their time waiting for them to turn up. Concern number 2, they were worried that these guys would leave their house and garden in a real state. In other words, they weren't particularly tidy, and they would leave a real mess for them to clear up. And also they were worried that these guys would use workman's-like language within earshot of their children. So we decided that what we needed to do was craft a really strong set of guarantees. So what we did was we said, you know what, from now on, when you work with us, we guarantee that we'll either be on time or 10 minutes early. When you work with us, we will guarantee that your house and garden will be as tidy, if not tidier, than it was when we first found it. And we guarantee that you will never hear a swear word from any of our contractors on site. The most important thing was, with that guarantee, if they invalidated that guarantee, what they said was that not only will you get every penny of what you've invested with us back, but also we will fund another roofer to come and finish the job for you. So, we had to do some work with the team, but actually, the kind of work that we did with the team was we worked on the company's vision, the company's mission, and the company's culture and its value statements, so that the team understood where we were going and who we wanted to be. And basically they wanted to be the best roofing company in the area. And not just that, they wanted to raise the bar for all trades. Now the team were inspired, enrolled, engaged and motivated by that vision. So much so that they actually said, you know what? We want to do this, we want to get behind it. So if we invalidate that guarantee because of our behavior on site, they told the business owner, John, that he would not need to pay them for the work that they'd done. So everybody was on board with this guarantee and this unique selling proposition. Good news is, guys, that gave them the confidence to not sell at £3,000, but to sell at £4,000 and then beyond that. So their prices were higher than their local competitors, and they could afford to charge higher prices because there was a much greater perceived value by their target market. Back to this, in terms of transactions, what we did with these guys was said, you know what? When you go and see your prospects from now on, position with them that you will not only meet every single promise that you've made, but you will also exceed their expectations. And when you've done that, ask them if it will be okay for you to come back and ask them if they've got 3, 4, maybe even 5 friends and family members who may also benefit from having a roof from this roofing company at some point in the future. In other words, they were positioning 4 or 5 referrals from every single customer that they met for future business. Now the good news is that's free and it's high conversion, because if word of mouth business is working well for you now, imagine how well it will work for you if you position with every single person that you work with that you're going to be asking for 5 referrals. You know what? You may even want to make that a condition of working with you. Now what does that do? It shows massive confidence in yourself when you are working with a prospect. And also it means that when you go back and ask for those referrals, it's not a surprise. So it's expected. So that's how we got more transactions with this roofing company, but those aren't real transactions at this point because they're referrals for the future. So I want to use a different example in terms of transactions with a nice restaurant that I work with. It's a little bit out in the sticks, but this restaurant, we had a look, and it's a pub restaurant. We had a look at the different days of the week, and we found that Sunday was one of the quietest nights of the week in this particular pub restaurant. So what we did was we surveyed the local people in the village, and we surveyed the ale drinkers that used to like to come to the pub on a Sunday night to find out what was it that they liked in terms of entertainment. And we discovered that there was a bit of a theme that jazz was popular. So we put jazz on a Sunday night. We had a lovely meal, a stay at the inn, a good cooked English breakfast with local produce in the following morning, and guess what? It became one of the busiest nights of the week. Again, there's about 50 or 60 different strategies that you could use to increase the number of transactions that you get from your existing customers, ways in which you can get customers to keep coming back. With a restaurant, we found it real easy. We knew that if we got somebody coming back four times from the very first visit, they were more likely to be somebody that became a regular. Then the lifetime value of that client became massive. So if we can find ways, just 3 or 4 new strategies within your business to increase the number of transactions with every customer you work with, you can see how it could be really easy to get 10% increase in that number too, right? So let's start thinking about results here, okay? So we've got small incremental increases in all of these 5 areas just by working on your existing strategies, testing and measuring in more detail, really starting to understand what is working well, what's not working as well as it could be, what's not working well at all that you might want to stop doing, like the £200,000 on radio advertising my roofing company did, and also thinking about other strategies that you're not currently using that you could be using. Now, if you just got a 10% increase in all those 5 areas consistently, what would that do to the bottom line in terms of a percentage increase? Well, if you've got a telephone with a calculator on it or a calculator in front of you, just work it out. 1.1 times 1.1 times 1.1 times 1.1 times 1.1 is 61%. You get a 61% increase in your profit just by getting 10% increases in all those 5 areas. Now, I don't know you, I don't know your business, but I don't know what a 61% increase in profit would mean to you. But I'm guessing you'd be pretty happy with the 61% increase in profit. Here's the next thing. If you consistently work on these areas, month after month, year after year, you get an added bonus, and that's the compound effect. Because every time you get a percentage increase on any one of these numbers, the next time you get a percentage increase on it, it's a percentage increase on a bigger number. So if you start to look at the compound effect, the results are amazing. So in the first year, we would get a 61% increase in your profits. If you did this consistently for 7 years, you would get a 3,200% increase on your original starting profit. That's the power of working on these 5 ways numbers. And the good news is there's over 400 different strategies to choose from in these 5 areas. And all I'm suggesting is that you work on 1, 2, 3, maximum 4 or 5 strategies at any one time. Improve your existing strategies by testing and measuring them and understanding what's working well, and introduce new strategies on a regular basis that you've learned about, you understand how they're going to work, or maybe you're even outsourcing and getting somebody to come in and do them for you. Well, I hope that's been helpful, and I hope that you can go and take this, start measuring these numbers straight away, and start thinking really strategically about all of these 5 areas: leads, conversions, transactions, average order values, and profit margins, in order to multiply the profits in your business. Thanks for listening.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.